Hi, today we're going to talk about how to differentiate using the, sorry, I should say quotient rule. And this is when you have a quotient of two functions and you try to find its derivative. So this is the rule. So f over g, it's going to be f prime of x times g of x minus f of x times g prime of x all over g of x squared. So here's a problem. I suggest when you do it, you set it up using the template that you see here. So x squared goes here, x squared plus 2 goes here, x squared here, x squared plus 2, and x squared plus 2. Derivative of x squared is 2x times x squared minus plus 2, minus x squared times the derivative of x squared plus 2 is 2x all over x squared plus 2 squared. That's going to give us 2x cubed plus 4x minus 2x cubed over x squared plus 2 squared. These two cancel. The answer will be 4x over x squared plus 2 squared. The next one, trying to find the derivative of ln t over t cubed. We are going to set up the same template. So ln t, t cubed, ln t, t cubed, t cubed. So all that, derivative of ln t is 1 over t times t cubed minus ln t times t cubed times 3t squared, I have to differentiate that, divided by t to the 6th. So we are going to get t squared minus 3t squared ln t all over t to the 6th. We can actually divide top and the bottom by t squared. This is going to give us 1 minus 3 ln t divided by t to the 4th. And that's our answer. Okay, moving on. Again, it's my mistake. It should say quotient. This function so this is x minus 1, this is e to the x minus 1, e to the x. Derivative of x minus 1 is 1, so it's e to the x minus x minus 1 e to the x all over e to the x. E to the 2x is going to give us, and you can probably leave it like that, or you can simplify it, e to the x minus x e to the x plus e to the x over e to the 2x. And if you can simplify it, it's 2e to the x minus x e to the x over e to the 2x. If you can factor out e to the x, to the x, that is going to give us, we can simplify that, and it's going to be 2 minus x all over e to the x. And the last problem again is a conceptual problem where we have a ratio of f over g. We know the values of f prime, g, and g prime at -1, and we need to write an equation of a tangent line. So the first, we need a point and the slope. Let's start with a point. So h of -1 will be f of -1 divided by g of -1, which is going to be 3 divided by -1, these two values, and it's -3. So our point is going to be -1, -3. For the slope, we need to find the derivative. So h prime of x is going to be f prime of x times g of x minus f of x times g prime of x divided by g of x squared. So in our case we're going to use -1. So h prime of -1 is going to be f prime of -1 times g of -1 minus f of -1 times g prime of -1 all over g of -1 squared. Now we just need to fill it in with values. So f prime of -1 is 2, g of -1 is -1, minus f of -1 is 3, g prime of -1 is 5, and g of -1 is -1 squared. So we're going to get this is -17, correct? This is our slope, and then the equation will be y plus 3 equals -17, x plus 1, and that will be the answer. I hope this helps.